Cool.
Roll.
All right. So basically, when it comes to mindset, you guys probably already know almost all of what people are going to tell you, right? Like, and this is the stuff that you'll hear. You need a purpose. You need to know your why. Have a big why. People will always tell you that. They'll tell you that you need to have written down goals, which all this stuff's true. Like if you have written down goals, your odds of success are a lot higher. I don't know if you guys have ever come across the study of Harvard students, but it's pretty fascinating that the people who had goals made 2 times as much money as the people without goals, and the people who had written down goals made 10 times as much money as both. So yeah, written down goals are obviously important. You already know that, I'm sure, though. You already know the classic, like you'll do more for others than you will yourself, right? Like, so if you're a parent or if you got someone that you care about, like you'll actually do the work when you don't feel like doing the work. You probably already know that you need to know what motivates you, right? Like we each have our own unique drivers. For me, I love to prove people wrong. If people tell me I can't do something, like that's something that stokes my motivation, and I know that. But you guys probably know that. You need to know your strengths. You know that. Like what's your personality type? If you do a Myers-Briggs, you do a DISC assessment, you take a strength finders test, you take all these different things to kind of figure out what you're naturally better at than most people. You probably already know that as well. And if you don't, like, it's a good refresher for some of that. You'll know that you need to have good habits, right? Like that ultimately be mindful of your thoughts, they become your words. Be mindful of your words, they become your actions. Be mindful of your actions, they become your habits. Be mindful of your habits, they become your character, right? You already know that stuff. And ultimately, habits are going to be the key that makes it so that you guys can perform consistently and get the results that you want, right? But ultimately, this whole training is not about what you already know. Instead, it's going to be about what you don't know. And this stuff, I can guarantee you probably haven't heard this, because I've never heard really that many people talk about this stuff. And especially in the way that we're going to combine it, it's like what it does is it just unleashes this level of consistent performance. It's a stack of habits that if you put them together in the sequence, then it's going to make like your ability to consistently close deals, show up, and like really enjoy the sales process the norm, right? And so this is it. And we're going to dive into each one in more depth. And I want you guys to be able to also feel free to ask questions as they come up. But basically, the first thing to understand is that effort counts twice. So what's that mean? Well, basically in the equation, talent times effort equals skill, and skill times effort equals achievement, right? And so effort counts twice on the road to achievement. And that's the thing about grit. Like the people who are willing to stick it out and show up when they don't feel like showing up are the people who get the results. And like a perfect example of it is just look at The Rock. I mean, you can't not look at how hard that guy works and see his results and be like pretty much amazed. So like how much effort, and if you're willing to put in the effort consistently, is going to determine how far you go with this stuff, right? And I know a lot of people out there want to promote like things like the laptop lifestyle and, you know, just chilling and stuff. But one of my favorite quotes comes from Einstein, and it's mastery demands all of a person, right? And if you're going to do this, pursue mastery. Like there's no reason to do this for anything else other than pursuing mastery. And ultimately, the pursuit of mastery in sales is the pursuit of mastery of self. It's it, because if you understand the mind at such a great degree that you can influence others' behavior, the real key is that you can influence your own behavior. And that's where the magic happens. And so the pursuit of mastery in persuasion and sales is worth it. It's worth it because at the end of the day, you're pursuing mastery in the mind. And there's really few things more powerful than that. And so when you know that's what you're pursuing, then it makes the effort easy to put into it, right? And so what you got to look at is having grit. And you have to make it up in your mind that you're a person who has tenacity, who has perseverance, right? So what we see for people who don't work is maybe the ads aren't working as well as they should be. Maybe the marketing is something's a little off in the targeting, and so they're taking shitty calls and they give up after 5-10 calls and they say it's not worth it. We had one guy that we put on a team that motherfucker quit after taking 2 calls. You're not going to be successful if you quit after taking 2 calls. I literally have gone 2 years just getting my ass kicked on something to try and figure it out. And I just showed up every day. And this leads us to the next point. How do you show up every day even when you are getting beat up, right? Because like not every offer works perfectly all the time. Moose and I, so a lot of you guys know Moose, but we have a joke that there's this like Shangri-La of offers where the advertising's always perfect. The offer is always great. There's no such thing as a bad lead. Like all you're going to talk to are just perfect fit people who have their credit cards out and they don't have any objections. That doesn't exist, right? Ads are weird. They're wonky. Sometimes, some weeks you're going to just like hit home runs every time you step up to the plate. Other weeks you're going to get people that are weird or stupid or that are really far from the hole that you can't even like, it's going to be a difficult sale or there's not even a chance of selling. And that's normal, right? Like we got to just filter through that and keep showing up. And that's where the effort counts twice. And how you can then learn to keep showing up is to learn to love a challenge, right? So the difference between the people who stick and the people who don't comes down to how do you perceive something that's difficult? Is something that's difficult a problem for you, or is something that's difficult an opportunity for you, right? And for me, a thing that I've always told myself is that I want to do hard work because hard work, like difficult problems, I want to solve really complex, difficult problems because otherwise I'm going to be bored. And I don't want to be bored. I'd rather be like struggling, solving a complex problem over a long period of time and keep banging my head against it than be bored, right? And so if you learn to love a challenge and embrace the challenge, that makes it fun. Like right now, we're doing some bodybuilding stuff to change our bodies. And trust me, go to the gym every day is a challenge. It's not easy. It sucks half the time, but I love the challenge. I love the ability to best myself. And you guys, if you take on that mentality that, you know, a challenge is an opportunity to grow as opposed to a challenge is something that's frustrating. If you view a challenge as like, oh, that's frustrating, I don't want to do that, as opposed to, oh man, this is difficult, like, I wonder if I can figure this out. That subtle shift in your perception of what the challenge is and learning to embrace the challenge changes everything, right? So like when I was younger, I went to Spain and lived with the family and learned Spanish on like a homestay program with a group of high school kids. And one of the girls on the program thought Spanish was hard. She was so frustrated that she like that the family didn't hardly speak English. She didn't like the food and everything was a problem to her. And she went home and had the shittiest experience being in Spain. Like, and this is a miracle, like to live with a family abroad that takes care of you and treats you great. That's a miracle. But she had the shittiest experience because she showed up and everything that was difficult was a problem or a frustration to her. And it wasn't an opportunity to grow or become different. And so like when we first got there, I remember they didn't speak a word of English. And so it's super difficult because you can't understand anything. Like you're just lost in outer space. And then you see that as an opportunity and you get obsessed with solving the problem and like that challenge of play, and then you turn it into a playful thing to try and like master or understand, then it becomes fun, right? So if you look at a challenge as an opportunity to grow, to figure something out that you didn't understand, and to get one step closer on the path to mastery, then you will be able to stick it out when stuff's not easy, which is the key. Ultimately, if you're going to stick it out or not is the biggest determining factor of your level of success that you'll hit inside of this, right? And most people just give up too soon. That's really what it comes down to. And the reason though is because challenges are frustrating, they suck, and it doesn't feel good, so I don't want to do it anymore. And they're not considering the long game, and they're not considering the outcome when you do solve that challenge, right? Which then brings us to the next point, which is the 1% rule. So a challenge sucks if you want it to miraculously solve itself. But if you just look at how do I get one step closer every single day, and how do I get 1% better every single day, that compounds, right? And so that's why consistency is so important. And showing up consistently and sticking with it is so important, because the compounding effect of the 1% rule leads you to, in 72 days, you're twice as good as you are now. And if you stick it out over the course of even just not even a full year, you're over 4 times better in half a year. Then you get 8 times better in just another 72 days. So that puts you at 3/4 of a year. You'd be 8 times better than you are today. And then if you stick it out for the full year, you're going to be over 16 times better than the person you are today if you just get 1% better every day consistently over 288 days, right? Which is insane. That's insane. And then you stick it out one more time, and now you're 32 times better. So in the course of a year, you could go from where you are now to being 32 times better than you are right now. And that's the process of the 1% rule. And if you look at it, that I don't have to be amazing right now. I don't have to be anything. I don't, like, if I could just look at where I'm at and how to get one step closer, then the compounding effect of that ends up being so massive. And it makes embracing the challenge easy because you're not looking for the big one felt swoop solution. You're looking for the incremental gain that compounds over time. So if this makes sense and you guys are here, type in the chat like yes, let me know it's making sense and that it's all clicking. I want to be able to see that this is resonating with y'all. So then we'll roll into negative thinking, right? And negative thinking to me is easily one of the most important parts. So everybody's going to tell you in mindset, oh, you need to think positive, right? You need to see the outcome you want to achieve. You want to manifest it. Fuck all that noise, right? Ultimately, what astronauts do in order to go to space, you have to prepare and you have to plan for every single thing to go wrong. Everything to go wrong. And only when you've prepared for everything to go wrong can it possibly go right. That's why they say an expert is the person who's made all the mistakes in a narrow domain, because they know everything that could go wrong, right? And so when you get a certain objection, that's awesome because you're learning how it can go wrong. And then when you come with a good question, you can then learn how to experiment and you can get 1% better. And then after you make all the mistakes in a narrow domain, and if you stick with this domain, which is basically helping people convert inbound leads into paying clients, and you master that little process right there, you'll make $250,000 a year in cash with little to no expenses. You can run it all through a business. You can then basically spend pre-tax money. You could be able to do it from anywhere in the world. You can open and close your calendar on demand and control it yourself. You get to talk to interesting people. You never get bored because every conversation's different. You are in control, which is amazing. Like, where are you going to find an opportunity like that? It's insane to be able to have this level of control and to not have the overhead. You know, a lot of you guys may see the business owners and think that they're getting rich over there, but what you're not understanding is that the business owner of the total revenue maybe pays themselves 10%, maybe 15% of the total revenue generated, right? So they're not making that much money. Most of the time, you guys are actually making more fucking money than the business owners, which is kind of crazy. You might not believe it, but it's true. Like, a lot of times you're going to make more money than the business owners that you're serving. And it's because you carry no overhead and they carry overhead. And really, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And you guys without overhead are keeping a lot more, right? And so, but the negative thinking part of it is so important because ultimately what you're going to be able to do is find all the problems. And when you're constantly scanning for threats and you're constantly looking for the things that can go wrong, then you can be prepared. And then when you're prepared, you show up and you don't panic, right? People panic when something happens on a call that they haven't prepared for. That's when you're going to freak out, and then you're going to get upset at an objection, or you're going to get upset at someone for behaving a certain way. People are irrational. People make decisions based on emotions. People are inconsistent because their conscious mind says one thing, their subconscious mind says another thing, right? And if you expect that, then you can prepare for that. And it's not going to knock you off of your certainty. It's not going to knock you off of your center, and it's not going to knock you out of your strengths, right? And so rather than sitting here thinking that every sale is going to close, what I like to do is figure out why every sale is not going to close. And then I can tie up those loose ends. And because I approach the sales process like that, I get more deals on the back end. So rather than trying to shove everyone in and ignore their objections or ignore anything that could be a threat, I'm going straight at threats, trying to figure out how to tie up the deal so that everybody's in alignment, everybody's in agreement, and then action happens because it's just the consistent and logical next step and the emotional next step that makes everyone feel good and it makes sense, right? So at this point, we've gone through over half of it, right? So the grit part, the effort counting twice and just deciding like, you know what, I'm going to persevere and I'm going to give it maximum effort. And then embracing the challenge makes it easy to persevere. So it's not difficult. And then when you're embracing that challenge, if you're not looking for this massive result, but you're just looking for a little incremental improvement every day and you consistently over time show up, it's going to massively improve. And then as you're making those improvements, you're looking for everything that can go wrong. Now you're going to start to embed into your mind all of the different situations that can go wrong. And that's how you will eventually achieve mastery in the narrow domain, right? Because you've experienced or you've encountered and prepared for everything that could possibly go wrong. So from there, the next part is the alter ego. And the alter ego is creating an identity outside of yourself that allows you to perform at a level that you yourself cannot perform at, right? Because ultimately we're people. We're all going to have problems. There's going to be shit that happens in life that's going to spill over to a phone call. There's going to be moments you don't want to get on a call. There's going to be like, you're going to get a call or you're going to get some news and you're going to show up on a call. And if you show up as you are going to bring that shit to the call. You don't need to bring that to the call. You can leave it at the door and you can wear your mask. You can put on whatever it is that your alter ego is and then play the person, play the role that you need to be. Because ultimately, sales is a performance like anything else. Sports is a performance, sales is a performance, and we're here, we are performers. And when you go on stage, AKA talk to a prospect, you don't need to be you. You could be a version of you, right? We all have a multiple range of characters inside of ourselves. Sometimes we can be aggressive, sometimes we can be soft and nice. Sometimes we can be hippies, sometimes we can be hard-nosed business people. You can like one thing and like another thing. You could love a Disney movie, but then love a hardcore action movie or a murder mystery. Like, you don't have to just be one person, right? And so when you create an identity that you step into, it makes performing consistently easier because you're not showing up with baggage. And that's the power of things like method acting. That's the power of things like if you watch a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, it's like insane to watch Daniel Day-Lewis perform because he literally becomes that alter ego. He leaves Daniel Day-Lewis at the door and his performances are so powerful. And so it's playing this like an actor, like a performer, and then allowing yourself to build this alter ego, right? And so when I first started in sales, my alter ego was this guy, his name's Jim Gissy. So Jim Gissy built this company here called Westgate, and they're basically the biggest privately held timeshare company in the world. They do over $1 billion a year in business, and Jim Gissy came in as like the sales superstar, and he was basically a phenom. He almost quit his job because he couldn't close. Then one day he went home, he like revised his script, practiced his script, memorized his script, and came out and then just like was salesman of the month almost every single month from that point. Then he became the sales manager, and as a sales manager, he had double the performance of everybody else. And then they made him a sales director, then a VP of sales. And like the guy makes like $3 million a year at Westgate, and he's basically the reason that they've been able to build their entire sales organization to $1 billion a year organization. So when I got on calls, I wasn't Mike. I was Jim Gissy in my head, and I would perform as Jim Gissy. And I would play that role. I'd take on that persona and that alter ego, and I would leave all the parts of me that weren't beneficial for the process of selling at the door, right? And so the key for you guys is to design your alter ego. Know who your alter ego is. Pick that alter ego. Like Beyonce does this as well. Beyonce says that in her music videos and when she goes on stage, she's not Beyonce Knowles, because Beyonce Knowles is a little girl who has the same problems as everybody else. When she's on stage or when she's at a music video or she has to do a photo shoot, she becomes Sasha Fierce. And Sasha Fierce is the part of Beyonce that doesn't have all the personal insecurities that everyone else has. And that's how she becomes Beyonce. Like, and she's created this alter ego that makes her, in our minds and in the world's mind, a certain character. And so for you to create that same impact in prospects' minds, design an alter ego. It will make your performance consistent and easy, so that when something does happen outside of the realm of sales in your personal life, because shit's going to happen in your personal life. There's no avoiding problems. And when something happens, you just don't want it to spill over into your sales calls. Cool. Are you guys with me so far? If you are, type in the chat box. Just want to know you're all like, if your heads are exploding, let me know. If this is different from everything else you've ever heard, I want to know that too. Or if you've heard a lot of this stuff before, I'm curious to know that. So much better than all the other mindset BS I see. I love it. Yes, because this is tactical. This is not some fluffy shit. This is real tactics. These are real frames that you can wear and own. And when you do, your performance compounds and gets so consistent, you'll be a freaking animal. So good stuff right here. So good. Heart. Love it. All right, guys. So process goals. Process goals are super important, because process goals are the things that you can control. You can't control if someone buys or not. That's just a fact. Like, ultimately, we're not in the business of controlling people. We're in the business of influencing people. And so because you're on a sales conversation, that means that you can't make the decision for someone. You're not pulling the credit card out of their pocket for them. You can only design the conversation to influence them pulling their own credit card out. And that's why, because in sales, it's a head game when you don't have control over the outcome. You have to focus on the things that you do have control over. And that's where the process goals are important, right? And so if you look at the parts of your calls that you want to focus on improving, or if you look at the number of conversations you want to have, or you look at the number of follow-ups you want to have, or you look at something that's inside of your control, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Like, so the first process goal I would ever focus on if doing this stuff is what we call the checklist for discovery. So it's 3 points that we need to check off when we're in the discovery mode. And so we need to understand, does the person feel understood? When we summarize the point, did they say exactly, that's it, like bang on, spot on, you nailed it, something like that, which is going to be the language of feeling understood. So does the person feel understood? Did they say one of those things when you summarize their problem back to them? And then did you get to the deep root motive? And if you remember in buyer sophistication, when someone's at a lower sophistication, usually they're here because they want to help their wife quit their job. They want to buy a home. They're about to have a baby and they really need to step it up. Their girlfriend is able to travel and they want to be able to travel with her so they don't lose the relationship. Like, those are going to be the types of things that motivate the person. If they're higher level, then growth becomes its own motive. And like, once sort of their basic needs are met and they're kind of over at a $10,000, $20,000 a month range, typically the motive becomes more vision. It becomes more impact. It becomes more about growing into the person that they can become. But when you nail the process there and they feel understood, they're going to say, that's right, you nailed it. Exactly. Yes, that's it. And that's what we say when we recognize truth. And if you can consistently elicit that response from people, you will be a much better communicator. And I urge you not to just practice it on the conversations, but practice it in your real life interactions. Summarize people's points in different language, not parroting it, where a lot of people will tell you in the sales process just to say what they said back to them. Don't fucking do that. You just sound like a parrot and people feel like they're not actually being listened to. And then it makes them like recognize that you're a salesperson. If you say it in slightly different words, slightly different metaphors, slightly different analogies, they feel like, cool, this guy gets it, I'm with him, you know, or he's with me, or this girl gets it, you know, she's smart, she can keep up. And when they feel that, then they're going to respect you and they'll buy from you, right? So if you're going to focus on the process goals, I would be looking at, you know, Did I confirm my calls consistently? That's going to be a big process goal. Am I confirming all my calls? If you do that, you're going to get a higher call rate with people that show up. Then you make more offers, and then you get paid more because your income's directly tied to the number of offers you make. This is just simple and plain. If you make more offers, you'll make more money, especially when it's a good fit, right? Like you got to make an offer to an actual good fit. But the thing with the process goals is to control what you control. And that includes things like follow-ups. That includes things like pre-call confirmation. That includes things like asking those questions and getting to the, that's it, exactly, okay, I feel understood. That includes things like, okay, well, how do you feel about everything so far? Like, are you a 9, 10 out of 10, or are you a 6, 7? And then them saying, I'm a 9, 10 out of 10, right? When you can get that, then you know, okay, my offer works great. Like how do you feel about this? So, does it all make sense? Do you feel good and get like 9, 10 out of 10 or 6, 7? I'm a 10 out of 10. Cool. I made the offer right. I did the offer portion right. And now that person feels like this is something that they want. Because ultimately your job is to create two things. And you're not really even creating it. You're just helping make it clear. And it's desire and belief, right? Because desire times belief equals conviction. If they have desire, but they don't believe that you can actually do it, or they don't believe something about the process, they're not going to buy. If they have the belief that you can do it, but they don't have the desire, again, they're not going to buy. If they have the desire and they have the belief that what you're saying is true, they're going to buy, right? It's just a matter of logistics at that point usually, and maybe a little bit of overcoming the resistance. But most of the time it's going to be logistics, like timing, money, things like that. And we can just navigate logistics easily because we're just solving problems, and you guys are here because you're good at solving problems, right? So process goals, focus on the things you can control, like pre-call confirmation, like the checklist at the end of the discovery, like the temperature check at the end of making the offer. And then when you do those things and you do them and you are then playing with that with the 1% rule, then you're going to really lock in. Does that make sense? And can you guys see how this relates to your calls and your conversations? Let me know. And then from that point, we'll roll into looking back. So a lot of times when we're in this high performing mindset, we're constantly looking at what we want to accomplish. And what we want to accomplish is in front of us. That's the gap, right? And that's why when we're in the conversation with people, we create the gap. The further that we can expand the gap, the bigger the gap, the more pain there is, or the more stress there is, right? So that's why your job is to partially expand the gap. That means you tell them, you give them the vision that they can achieve more than they're even thinking about. Or, if they feel good about where they are, you help them see and like really bring them back down to reality that they're not as good as they think that they need to be, right? And those are things that are going to expand the gap. But expanding the vision is a bigger part of expanding the gap, because that makes them feel motivated and they feel understood and they love that part of it. And so when we have the gap and we're looking at where we want to go all the time, it creates stress in our brain. But if you look at how far you've come, it creates this it's just inherently motivating and it feels good. And if you look at so right now we're doing the bodybuilding thing that I've mentioned already. And in the process of doing it, I have to do 30 minutes of cardio. And I promise you, from the minute it starts, it sucks. I fucking hate it. I hate the whole time. And I can't wait for it to be done from when I start. But I'm just sitting there thinking about how far I've come. And I do the math, right? It's just like, oh, cool, I've already completed 20%. But if I were at that point where I've completed 20% and I say, oh man, I got 80% more to go, then I'm going to have the negative emotions that are going to start swirling through my body, and that stress is going to kick in, and it's going to make it more difficult to complete the activity. Whereas if I look back, I get the charge of endorphins and of serotonin and all that stuff that happens when you get excited and happy. And so then it's like, oh, cool, this isn't that bad. It's not going to be that bad. It's going to be easy. I got this. You already got this, man. And it's like, yeah, man, you already did 20%, and 20%, shoot, 20% is the big lever. Once you do that, the rest is easy. Once you do that, you got it, man. Oh, dude, you're already 50% of the way there. And if you're indexing how far you've come and you're constantly looking back as opposed to always looking ahead at your goals, it makes the process fun. It makes the process rewarding. It makes the whole thing easier and less stressful. And so then you can access the better parts of your brain, and you can access and tap into more energy. And that's why the process goals work so well when you add looking back on top of it. Like, it's more multiplicative than it is additive. But if you take a process goal and you start to look back at how far you're coming, like, and Cody can attest to this, you know, we use scorecards inside of the business. And today we did it. We ran through our scorecards this morning, and to see how far he's come since the beginning of the quarter to today, his results have been awesome. And so that makes the process so much more fun and rewarding when you're looking at that, instead of trying to figure out like why we're not somewhere else. And then you get stressed out and you kind of like use that. And so you want to take the process of looking back at how far you've come and allow that to help fuel you. So that's it for this. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I want to turn it over to you in case you do have questions, and then you guys can ask anything you want about this stuff. But take this, use this, maybe take a screenshot of this if you need it. I promise this will serve you. And yeah, I want to open it up to you guys for questions.
I have a question.
Go for it.
First of all, love that. I think very similarly about mindset, that I know it's important, but I have a hard time like convincing myself of a lot of it, because I'm like, oh, like I have to visualize like that. That'll never work. Like it's too logical a thing. But the alter ego thing, I think that's definitely something that I need to work on. And I was wondering like what strategies or like techniques you kind of do to assume that alter ego, because I know there's a lot of things in like NLP, you like anchor to different actions. I don't know if you do any of that, or if it's just like a mindset shift, or what it looks like there.
Yeah, so in terms of, and this is really good, with the alter ego, typically you want to ask yourself, like, what's the trait that I want to embody first? And then you'll find the character that embodies that trait really well. Typically what I've had work really well for me, like a lot of people talk about using physical totems, you know, so like a physical item that anchors their alter ego. Wearing certain clothes, maybe, you know, maybe it's a hat, maybe it's a certain shirt, maybe it's something like that. That works for a lot of people. What I've typically done, because I just like, at the time I was doing the nomad stuff too, so it was very difficult to have physical stuff. I just didn't have a lot of physical stuff. And I wanted to travel really light and keep the load light. So I didn't do that. What I used was music. So like I would use a song as a trigger, or I'd use an image. So I'd have like maybe something I grabbed on Google Images that embodied the characteristic of what I wanted. And then I would just like open that on my computer and I'd look at that image, and then that would activate and bring me to whatever mode that I needed to be in.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
What else? What other questions you guys got?
So I have this issue where like my brain and body always seeks to get comfortable. Like even in the uncomfortable, I'll turn it to comfort really quickly. And like I love challenging myself and going into new zones, but I find that I always turn it right back into some kind of a comfort thing really quickly.
Interesting. And so can you give us an example of a time that happens?
Yeah, so like let's say working out, you were bringing that up as an example. You know, it might be uncomfortable to start like doing 30-minute cardio for, you know, right away. Within a week, I'll get really comfortable with it. It won't be a big deal with me anymore. Like it might be uncomfortable for a day or two, but then I'm just comfortable with it again. And so I find myself always like narrowing myself back down to a comfort zone still somehow.
Yeah, which is normal. You're going to acclimate to anything that you do long enough. Part of that's normal, but do you see it being a problem?
I feel like I do it too quickly, maybe. Like, I mean, like I'm like really quickly go into comfort. Like really quickly I adapt. I don't know if it's a problem or not.
Interesting. So you don't feel like it's affecting you negatively?
Not necessarily as results wise. I find it affecting me as far as motivation wise, because then I don't feel challenged anymore. I'm constantly not feeling challenged.
Yeah. I understand that. And like, typically that's going to be a lot of what makes people good at sales is that same sort of thing. The way that I kind of described it is like, I personally feel very similar. Like I have a high need for novel stimulation. And if I don't have novel stimulation, then I get bored super fast. And I think that's like a part of the sales DNA, because I think all of us are going to have that high need for novel stimulation. And so there's a couple things that you could look at, right? So a big part of it is like maybe what you need to do is take a look at like certain people for your alter ego, and you could latch on to like look at someone like Michael Jordan, look at someone like Tiger Woods, right? Like the amount that they practice, or Kobe Bryant, the amount that they practice and that they focus on the fundamentals, and they just keep seeing if like, can I take it a little bit further? Can I take it a little bit further? You know, another guy would be Tom Brady. Like that is consistency and effort applied just to see what that little 1% compounds into over a long period of time. And so it's easy to check out when you don't feel like you can get that much better. But the question then really becomes like, how far can we really go with this? Right? Like how far can this thing go? And like, where's the limit? And can I be the greatest of all time? And like those sorts of questions are going to be the things that will inspire you to stay focused and stay consistent when the novelty wears off. Because ultimately the craziest part is like novelty, there's after a while it's just going to wear off all the time. And so if you're pursuing the initial rush, then you miss the fun, right? Like the fun comes really when you got to stick with it when it's not fun anymore, because that's when you really see what's possible. And like I don't know if you've ever heard of the dip, which is an idea by it's an idea by Seth Godin, right? And this is actually really common. It goes like this. So when you're starting an activity or improving, usually there's an initial gain that's really fast, and there's a growth curve that's really fast. And then after that growth curve, you go into what's called a dip. And then things start to suck, and it's not as fun, it's not as engaging or anything like that. The question is, like, first you got to make sure that this, whatever the pursuit, the mastery that you're pursuing, is actually what you want. And then if it is actually what you want and it's lined up with what you want, then it becomes a matter of just pushing through your dip. And when you do push through the dip, like that's when you get to the other side at a degree where you'll look back and you'll be like, holy hell, like what I was able to accomplish was beyond what I ever thought possible. And like most people just don't push through the dip. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I don't know if that answered your question, and if you got follow-up questions on that, please fire away.
It answered it in its own way. What I got out of it is aim higher, and the only person I'm really competing with is myself. So there's always, more to do, bigger, better, badder.
Yeah. And the other big thing.
Go ahead.
So one idea, and I'm curious to hear what you think, Cody, too. The other big thing though is to like think long term, right? So like usually what you're talking about is like that you're talking about feelings that are short term, and you got to think long term. Like in the long term, like the thing that separates people that are successful and people that are unsuccessful, one of the key things that separates them is people who are successful think in longer cycles. And in fact, if you look at how you get paid based on the amount of that you have to think ahead, right? So like a daily employee at a restaurant, let's say, only has to think about their orders and what's going on that day. The manager has to plan out what's going on a week to 2 weeks in advance. The director level people are typically going to be planning in terms of quarters, and the CEO needs to think in terms of years. So like 2-3 years in advance where the vision of the company is going. And so you get paid directly in proportion to your ability to think ahead. And when you're finding that you're getting comfortable, a lot of what you got to anchor it back to is like, what's the long term here? And when you look at it from the long term perspective, then it becomes easier to kind of like reignite the motivation to see like what's fucking possible. Because that's the question, what's possible? And then that will keep you and help you push through a dip.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for Andres and like really any of us as salespeople, I think that like to that point, Mike, is that a lot of us do think in our next call, this call, our next, week or something like that, our next opportunities are, okay, I've got 5 calls in the calendar tomorrow, I'll hit this tomorrow. But like, don't underestimate the 1% rule here. Because if not only is thinking ahead going to motivate you to say, okay, I've got to do a lot of action. I've got to take a lot of action if I really want to get there, if I want to be one of the best in the world at what I do. But also, like, I think a lot of us aren't tracking the 1% that we are improving. So whether it is handling that objection differently, making sure that all your calls are confirmed the night before instead of the day of, or just showing up more present, making sure that you have no distractions, that kind of thing, being really ruthless in protecting your time, like any of these things that we know will overall serve our end goal, and like being very strict about our 1% improvements. I think that's, for me, because I get comfortable really quickly too, that's one way that I have completely like shot myself in the foot and stopped myself from growing so much, is not only just being aware of that 1% improvement, but actually sticking to it. And when at the end of the day it doesn't get done, or I don't feel like I made that 1% improvement, knowing what I'm going to do tomorrow to make myself 2% better or 4% better. So Andres, that might be a combination of all those 7 things that Mike went through. You might have to find more attachment to your alter ego. You might have to look ahead, higher, and really find ways to love your challenges. It sounds like that's not really the issue for you, but really tracking the 1% improvements that you're making, and then always looking at that progress, and then finding new ways, fun novelties or creative ways to get excited about the new things you're trying, even if you don't think that they're possible, because that's the type of person that you are, that you align more with the extremes or opposite ends of the spectrum.
Awesome. Love it, guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
What else? You guys got other questions?
Yeah, so I have a quick question just about my sort of like a bit of my alter ego and the way I like go into calls. So I'm from London, UK. So when I talk to people on the phone, a lot of them are based in the US. And I was just actually having a conversation with Cody as well, talking about this. But like it's like he just told me I should be myself. But I find that a lot of the time when I'm speaking to people, because they're from the US, like I sort of just like feed on their energy, and sometimes even like end up using like a slight American accent as well. So I don't know if that feeds into that alter ego, but like, what do you think about that? Is that something I should continue, or should I just be myself and just stick to what I know?
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid, right? So like what you're doing is just mirroring and matching a person, which is normal. That is you actually doing it. So it's not like inauthentic to you to do that. So if and it goes this way too, like again, we have a range of personalities inside of ourselves. So if I'm going to be talking to someone who's from the UK, I'm going to use a little bit more UK terminology, right? So I'm going to say rubbish instead of trash. I'm going to say, like slightly different things. I'm going to say quid instead of pounds, just because it's like more in their terminology. And so like I'm going to speak a little bit closer to their language than I would someone else, because like that goes down to that Nelson Mandela principle that we talk about a lot here, which is like, if you speak to a man in a common tongue, you speak to his mind. If you speak to a man in his native tongue, you speak to his heart, right? If I talk to someone in the South, every now and then I might like put on just like a subtle little bit of a kind of Southern accent, because I'm from, I'm from the South too. Or if I'm from New York, I might talk a little bit faster, a little bit sharper to a person. If I'm from Cali, I might be a little bit more relaxed. And like, if I'm talking to someone who, it comes from more like an urban culture, I'm going to speak more urban and like hip hop to them. Like, so the language and the terminology that I'm going to use with the person are going to match them, but it's going to still be me. And the alter ego that you take on is actually different than that. So the alter ego that you take on is typically going to be like an identity or like a trait that you're trying to encapsulate. So maybe like you're being too soft on a call and you want to be aggressive, then I would take on an alter ego around like a sort of aggression. Maybe you want to be more smooth and sophisticated in how you're talking, so I would take on an alter ego around that. And so the alter ego that you pick is going to be based on the trait that you're trying to demonstrate or resemble in order to expand that. But for you to match the person you're talking to is normal, and it's good. Like if I talk to a religious person, especially like I know they're super Christian, or if I talk to someone from the Middle East, like I'm going to say stuff to them. Like someone from the Middle East, I'm going to be like, Salam alaikum, my brother. Like, and they'll be like, what? How do you know that? And like, yeah, like I'm going to tell stories that are going to relate to them about, my Syrian mentor who taught me how to sell. And I'm going to talk to them about my trip to Morocco more likely than I am going to be with someone from the deep South in the US. They don't want to hear none of that, And so who you're talking to, you're going to mirror and match and kind of like be the person that you need to be in order to get them to where they need to go, right? And that's like, there's a saying like the best salespeople are chameleons, and you're going to understand your base at that point, and then you're going to understand like the range of people that you can become.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so don't worry about like, am I not being myself? Am I being inauthentic? Like you're being authentic because you have the capacity to be all of these different characters.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, bro. What else? Any other questions?
Hey, Mike, what about some more talk on the lower percent? I would really like some clearly defined metrics of what I'm supposed to be looking for, because I think that might be key for me to keep in mind.
Can't get it. I can't.
Yeah, can you type the question, because we can't hear you that well. The internet's pretty choppy. I heard you like clearly defined metrics, but that was pretty much all I got out of that. So if you want to type the question, I'm happy to run on it.
Oh, I was just saying.
We literally can't hear you at all. It just like is a robot garble. So could you give more defined metrics? Okay. Defined metrics in terms of what?
The 1% rule.
Yeah. So in terms of the metrics, like the ones that I laid out in the process goals are probably going to be your best ones, right? So the checklist, like, did they feel understood? Did you get to the subterranean motive? Did they say exactly that's it? And that would be the one I'm looking to master there. When you present the offer, are you a 9, 10 out of 10, or are you a 6, 7? You want as many 10 out of 10s as possible. And you can start to track those and see how you're presenting your offer and how it's doing. So those would be probably the like main immediate ones that I would look at, as well as follow-ups, pre-call. Those sorts of things are going to be huge in terms of getting your average like close percentage way up, because like when you're really, really killing it, you should see like about 50% of your deals more or less come from follow-ups. So it will be like conversations where people, you talked to them a month ago and then something in their life happened. They text you and they say, I'm in, like, let's go. Like, dude, let's jump in. Like, hey, Angela, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation and I'm ready to go. Like, how do we get started? Like, you'll get text messages like that. And so that would be another thing I would be looking at. And so, am I doing my pre-call? Am I doing my post-call and like the follow-up activities? Those would be things. Another thing that I would say, like, if say your calls are going amazing, other stuff is just adding them as a friend on Facebook. Sometimes what you guys can do, if you don't want to like post this publicly all the time, you can actually create friend lists on Facebook. And so you can add all your prospects to a list on Facebook, and then you could post organic content where you're basically like, handling objections or you're sharing client wins and things like that, so that they see that and you stay in front of them over time consistently. And John, look in the training that's in the training, the pre-call text messages. So if you just jump into all the trainings on the units, it's in there. But yeah, if you are posting and like maybe you're hand copying sales letters and like classic, if you go to swiped.co, you can find like some timeless sales letters. I would look at anything by Gary Halbert, anything by John Carlton. You could do anything by Dan Kennedy, like, and you hand copy those sales letters. It will help you write organic so much better. And if you add everybody on Facebook, you put them on a friends list, you post the organic, which you would be inspired by the calls that you're taking. So you handle objections, you say things that are really inspiring you, you share client wins, those sorts of things. You're going to see a huge number of the conversations that you had a month, 2, 3 months ago will then message you and say like, let's get going. So that would be another big thing that I would look at doing. And that's the difference, right? Like that's going the extra mile. So many people think that their job starts and ends on the phone call, which you need to master the phone call first. But when you do the follow-up and then you do the organic and you do the pre-call stuff, like that's when you really will take this thing to like the next level. And especially you, Angela, like I truly believe like you can do 200 a month. I think like you're the type of person who's focused and dedicated enough to this. And if you just add some of these extra things, like you can start to have consistent 200 grand months. And like in that case, you're probably looking at 25, 30 grand a month in commissions, which is just fucking nuts. So love it.
Awesome.
Let's do it, is what she said. What else? You guys got any last questions? Yes.
Yeah, is it the little, yeah.
Love that, John. It's pretty crazy how big it compounds too when you look at it. So all right, we'll give you guys another 30 seconds if you want to ask any last questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up. So any last questions? Going once. Going twice.
Yeah, we'll post the replay for you, Peter.
Good. All right, y'all. Yeah, and Peter, I think you'll really like some of this stuff. It's very different than what you heard, especially the content piece. What up, Sonny? We're just wrapping up, actually. So
3 a.m.
guys, we'll post a replay for you, Sonny, inside of the group, and go ahead and watch that there. But yeah, this is awesome, and I'm glad you guys were all here for this. So
yep. Let's make this stuff actionable, guys. We're going to find ways to wrap these things into each other, right? They're not just individual principles to live by. It's it's a list of principles that you guys can absorb into your life. So awesome.
And they stack. That's the cool part. It stacks and makes it like really powerful. So close some deals this week. Share your wins in the group. Be sure to share your wins in the group. If you have any friends that want to close some deals, change some lives, and make some money, be sure to introduce them to us. Please, best person to introduce them to is Moose. And let's go get this paper, guys, and change some lives along the way.
Let's get it going. Awesome. Yeah, everyone have a good week. Thanks, Mike, for dropping in on us.
Yep. Thank you, Cody.
All right. Later, guys.